can I hear
Thank you very much, David. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Kettering Borough Council Planning Committee this evening. Welcome to councillors, officers and members of the public watching us on YouTube. Firstly, to note that this is a virtual meeting through Zoom, so if we do encounter any technical issues this evening, please do be patient. We'll do our very best to get those resolved as soon as we can. And just to make everyone aware, I will call all speakers, whether that's officers, councillors or members of the public speaking on agenda items this evening by their name, so it's clear who is speaking at any one time. So I'm now going to go through the protocol for each item, how we'll conduct business this evening for each of the 6 items we've got on the agenda. So first we'll have an officer update where applicable. The officer will then present their report. The screen will be shared and we'll view that through that. We'll then hear from our speakers in order present on the speakers list. We'll go to member debate where members get a chance to discuss the application. I will then state the officer's recommendation on each item to be voted upon. We'll seek a proposer and seconder for the application. Callum will then undertake a vote where each member will confirm whether they're for, against or abstain on each item. And then once the decision's been reached following that vote, I will state that decision and we'll move to the next item. So can I turn to Callum, please, to conduct a register of everyone attending this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening all. If members and officers could give a verbal indication that they are present when called, starting with Councillor Davies.
Present.
Councillor Deering.
Present.
Councillor Edwards.
Present.
Councillor Mitchell.
Present.
Councillor O'Hara.
Present.
Councillor Rowley.
Present.
Councillor Fairland.
Present.
And Councillor Titcombe.
Present.
Thank you. And from the officers, we have David Pope, the committee manager.
Present.
James Wilson, the interim head of development services.
Present.
Louise Holland, development services manager.
Present.
Peter Chapman, development services manager.
Present.
Sean Bennett, the senior development officer.
Present.
And Jamie Parsons, our senior legal representative.
Chair, sorry, Councillor Adams has emailed us to say she's having trouble getting in.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor. If she does make it in time for the presentation on the first item, she will to vote on that. If she joins us after that, she won't be, but hopefully we'll see her, and then obviously for future items she'll be able to take part. So hopefully she will have success when she.
I will just send her the link again, Chair.
I've sent her the link, David.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, David. So I'll leave that in David's capable hands and crack on with the apologies, please, Callum, if we've got any apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Stanton and Councillor Morton, with Councillor Edwards and Councillor Deering acting as substitutes tonight.
Thank you very much, Callum. Do we have any declaration of interest, please, members?
Chair, Clarence Road is in my ward, and I think our legal gentleman would like to say a word, and then I will say something about this. Thank you.
Certainly. Would you like to do that now, Councillor and Jamie, or should we part that till the agenda item?
It's up to you, whichever suits really. If you're waiting for a councillor to come in, shall we deal with that now, just for seeing if Councillor Adams joins us?
Thank you. Yes, I would. Yeah. Thank you, Jamie.
Councillor Thurland, did you want to?
Yeah. Jamie, do you want to? Yeah.
Yes, I can do. I understand that Councillor Thurland called in the agenda item 5.3, and there's been a little bit of concern as to whether or not the reason for calling in, albeit just through the standard process, would constitute possibly a predetermination of the application itself. Having discussed this with the councillor, that wasn't the intention. She is not in a predetermined position. She hasn't written in a formal letter of her position, and as such wishes to make a statement to that effect, and thereby to enable her to join in the debate and the vote.
Thank you very much,
Jamie. Yeah, and I would like to make it clear by using the normal channels to call an application to committee, which is what I did, does in no way predetermine my decision tonight. I have not written in a letter of objection to this application. it was my concern, not my determination or my formal objection to calling it in. The printing in the document seems to indicate that I'd written a formal letter, and Jamie will confirm that there is no letter on file because I have never written one. And I will be asking for an explanation later, Chair, but just to clarify, I called it in as a normal ward councillor, and I was not predetermined to especially the objection that says overdevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor and Jamie, for clarifying there. Very grateful for that confirmation. Do we have any further declarations of interest at all from other members? No. Okay, thank you. So we turn to our minutes on the 8th of September committee meeting this year. Is everyone happy to sign that as a true record as read in the agenda paper? Okay, looks like that's agreed. Thank you. I'll sign that later. So I have no urgent items. We turn to our speakers list this evening. We've got 3 speakers joining us. First thing on item 5.2, KET 2020-0264, St Anne's Residential Care Home, 12 The Crescent in Kettering. We have Michelle Bangal, agent for the applicant, who's joining us by video. Then on item 5.4, KET 2020-0339, Plot 1 Weekly Wood Avenue, Kettering. We have Christopher Dwan, who's agent for the applicant, who will be joining us by video. And finally, 5.6, KT 2020-0580, 82 Butchley Road in Kettering. We have Paul Brogan, agent for the applicant, who's also joining us by video. So 3 speakers, and that decides the order we'll take business in this evening. So we'll go firstly with 5.2, 5.4, 5.6, then 5.1, 5.3, and 5.5. So 6 items of the agenda, packed agenda this evening. So as ever, if we could have nice, concise answers and responses, and make sure we keep the debate focused, that would be very much appreciated, and presentations as well. So without further ado, we turn to our first item, item 5.2, KT 2020-0264, St Anne's Residential Care Home, 12 Crescent in Kettering. So David is just going to share the screen. There is no update on this application.
Can we all see that?
That looks good to go, David. Thank you. So good to go with the presentation.
Thank you. So this application is on the Crescent in Kettering within the Headlands area. It's an existing care home, St Anne's Residential Care Home. The proposal is for a 2-storey side extension. And to facilitate that, there is the need to demolish 3 dwellings, which you can see within the location plan there to the south of the existing care home. Part of the aim of the application is to provide a net increase of 13 ensuite rooms, but also to provide additional dementia care as part of the wider care home offer. There's also enhanced facilities within the care home as a result of the application, increased garden space. There's also a balcony proposed at the first floor, which I'll come back to when we move on to some of the other plans, and that's to the rear of the property. If we could move to the next slide, please. So this is a block plan showing the location of the 2-storey side extension. As you see, it's covering 2 of the properties to the south, and that's 28 and 30, the Crescent. The other property to the south, number 32, will also be demolished, but that is to make way for an additional secondary access point that will provide an access and then space for staff parking. So that's essentially the proposal. If we could move on to the next plan, thank you. So as you can see, in terms of the existing care home, it's arranged in a sort of T-shape layout currently. And just before we get into more detail of the report itself, just a few comments around the principle and the policies that are relevant to this particular application. There are a number of applicable policies, and the report is very comprehensive in terms of its assessment of the principle. Overall, officers consider that the application is acceptable in terms of its actual principle. However, there are a few policies which I'll just mention. In terms of the area action plan for the town centre, there is a specific policy around the area within which this site falls, and that's policy 24, which is within the report. Another policy which is relevant is a saved policy of the local plan, and that's K16, and that's a specific policy around special housing areas and the headlands is one of those particular areas. So in a nutshell, the thrust of those policies is really to protect and enhance the residential character of those areas, and also to protect those areas against unsympathetic non-residential uses. Now, the officers have gone into a lot of detail to assess the application against those policies. And although this is not a dwelling house or C3 use, it does have a residential character. And it is considered that, taking all those policies into account and also the policies of the JCS, that the principle of the development is acceptable. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So unfortunately, this is not 100% clear in terms of the extension. It should be highlighted in yellow, but essentially it's the area on the left of the screen, which is the extension. And I'll provide you with a layout plan which will show the exact location of the balcony. So obviously I'll come on to a bit more detail about residential amenity at that point, but it's essentially the area on the left of your screen. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And again, this is the first floor part of the extension. So the area on the left is the proposed extension. And as I mentioned, the extension has also allowed the internal refiguration of some of the units as well, which has allowed a proposal to also deliver enhanced facilities for the existing residents as well. And the report details some of those uses in terms of cinema room, hair salon, so different facilities as well as the additional ensuite rooms. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is the roof plan of the proposed extension. Next slide, please. And these are the various existing floor plans of the 3 residential units that will be lost as part of the proposal. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed site plan. Now, the bluey purpley dot on the plan is highlighting the location of the balcony, which is proposed at first floor level. And we provided an arrow, blue arrow, which shows the distance between the edge of that balcony and the nearest boundary with number 34, which is the nearest residential property. Number 34 has registered an objection to the scheme, citing various concerns which are set out in your report. The distance of that blue arrow is approximately 26 metres. And also you'll note that the balcony is enclosed on the sides by the 2-storey nature of the built form. So any views will be very oblique, looking over to that potentially that top area of the adjacent garden. But it obviously provides an enhanced amenity space for the residents at first floor level. In terms of other amenity issues, there is on the side of the extension a first floor. You'll see it on this plan as a door, which is adjacent to the access road, but at first floor level there is a window. Now that is conditioned and covered by condition 3 to be obscurely glazed and also restricted in terms of its opening, just to stop any potential for overlooking or perceived overlooking of the adjacent occupiers. In terms of amenity, just to give you an idea of separation distances, in terms of the distance from the edge of the extension to the boundary, that's approximately 9.4 metres. and number 34, the crescent, is then set off their boundary by approximately 2.5 metres. So there is a good separation distance between the 2-storey extension that's proposed and the neighbouring property. In terms of boundary treatment, there is a condition proposed regarding that, and that's twofold really. There's obviously the residential amenity to ensure that, particularly on the edges adjacent to number 34, that that is a secure boundary and protects residential amenity, but also to the rear to ensure there's no unauthorised access of network rails land. There are comments in the report regarding their original concerns about that. They have withdrawn those concerns, but obviously we need to ensure that there is a secure and appropriate boundary treatment along those areas. So that does form a condition for us to obviously approve when those details come to us. In terms of amenity, just to say, obviously there is, obviously with demolition of the existing properties, there are concerns from third parties around how that will happen and any potential impacts on them while that process is taking place. And there is a condition around a demolition and construction management plan. Obviously, we recognise that it is in a residential area, so we do need to protect existing residents from any impacts associated with that demolition process or the construction itself of that extension. So that is a condition which is set out in your papers. And the last thing I'd just like to mention on amenity is obviously we don't just look at the amenity of existing surrounding neighbours. In this particular case, we've also looked at the amenity of the existing occupiers at the care home, just to ensure that there's no impact in terms of positioning of windows or anything like that. And in this case, windows and openings have been positioned appropriately, and there's the correct separation distances between those, just to ensure it doesn't impact on the existing occupiers of the care home itself. In terms of parking, as I said, there is a secondary access proposed. On the right-hand side of this plan, there is an existing access which leads to a parking area. And then on the left-hand side of the plan, you'll see it says staff parking, and that's a new access which will lead to 11 parking spaces, which will be for staff of the site. Now, there are various comments in the report regarding parking from the County Council. And just to explain a little bit more detail around that, when the County Council first gave comments on the application, they looked at the totality of the use rather than just purely looking at the extension. And what we have to do is look at the extension itself. We can't, unfortunately, look at a historic situation and any possible under provision, because obviously standards move on, and this care home was built before the County Council adopted their current parking standards. So we must look at the extension itself and obviously the impacts associated with that extension. And in terms of the extension, there is a requirement for 9 additional parking spaces, and in that area there's 11. So in terms of what they need to provide, they've actually over-provided for what their proposal is. Next slide, please. So these are the existing elevations which show the care home. And if we could go to the next slide, please. This is the proposed elevations, and you'll see that there's a sort of a linking extension before you get to the main 2-storey extension. And that's to provide a bit of visual separation, a bit of a transition into the extension, and also to try and enhance and maintain that residential character that I was talking about before, because obviously it's important with the demolition of those 3 units to ensure that we do retain that residential character, and officers consider that the design that's proposed does do that. If we could go to the next slide, David.
You just bear with us, Louise. It looks like it's just restarting. That sounds like someone joined on Zoom. So
Okay.
yeah, I think it kicked him out of the presentation there, but it looks like he's, yeah, that's good to go.
Lovely, thank you. So these are the existing street scene at the bottom and then the proposed at the top. And again, you'll just, you'll see, as I was explained, about that transition into the extension, which is trying to obviously just maintain that residential character. If we could go to the next slide, please. So if I could take you just through some of the photos to give you a bit of context around the site. So this is the existing point of access to the existing parking area at the care home, with the care home directly in front of you. The next slide, please. And then this is just sort of the care home straight on, and then you'll note adjacent to that are the dwellings that will be demolished as part of this application. And then if we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is within the existing parking area. And if you'll remember back to the floor plans I showed you and just mentioned about the T-shaped existing sort of form of the building. And that's that T-shape that you can see there with the existing entrance on the left and the parking area to the front. If we could go to the next slide, please. So here we're back to the care home, which is on the right of your photo. And then to the left, you'll see the two-storey dwellings that will be demolished as part of the proposal. And then if we could go to the next slide, please. So again, this is a full view of those two properties, which will be demolished to facilitate the two-storey extension. And if we could go to the next photo, please. And then this is number 32, which will also be demolished as part of the application. And this will actually facilitate that secondary access point into that additional staff parking area. And then on the very left of the photo, you'll see number 34, the crescent, which, as I mentioned, has written in with some objections and concerns, which are set out in your report. And next slide, please. And then this is a view looking from towards the care home from the crescent, and you'll see 36, 34 on the left of your photo. And then you can obviously see the street scene looking up to those properties that will be taken down, and then the care home at the very end of that run of buildings. And the next slide, please. Thank you. Just one last thing I'd like to mention. Just when I was talking about parking, just to clarify as well that this site does fall within the area of parking, residential parking permits. Just to clarify that point before obviously we go to the speakers. But overall, obviously the report is a very comprehensive one, and I've taken you through some of the key points. But officers consider that with the application of all the various conditions that we've set out, that the proposal is acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that presentation there, Louise. So we do have one speaker on this item, Michelle Bangor, who's the agent for the applicant, who's going to be joining us by video. So I'll just await David to bring her into the meeting.
Hi, Michelle.
Just connecting to our audio, I think.
Hi, Michelle. Can you hear us? You need to unmute yourself because we can't hear you. Bottom left.
Hear me now?
There we go. You've got 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair and councillors. My name's Michelle Bangle. Can they see me? Sorry.
No problem. Did you want to start again, Michelle?
Yeah, sorry.
Not at all. That's we're good to go when you are. You've got 3 minutes.
Okay. I'm the manager of St Anne's Care Home. I've lived in Kettering for almost all my life and have worked at St Anne's since 1994. I was a deputy manager for 14 years, and then I became the manager over the last 3 years. Since opening St Anne's, we've looked after many hundreds of members from the local community when they were in need of care, and in particular providing care for those living with dementia. I am pleased to say that our home is very popular and continually in demand for high quality of love and care we give to our residents. When St Anne's opened in 1993, it was a purpose-built, state-of-the-art home. But now, 27 years later, standards and expectations have moved on, and St Anne's has been left behind. This is why we, the staff of the home, are so pleased that our company, B&M Care, is proposing to reinvest in expanding and improving our facilities at St Anne's. Expanding the home will enable more defined areas to be created, tailored to different residents' care needs. A larger home will also aid the cohorting of staff and residents, which have become a very important factor in helping to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus and other diseases. The investment in the home will enable us to offer our residents a new range of facilities, including additional passengers lift, cinema room, gym, chapel, and an outside balcony area. We hope this proposal is viewed as a positive contribution to the community. Not only will it benefit our residents, but also provide an additional employment opportunities during the construction phase and future running of the home. We would therefore respectfully ask for your support of our application tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for your contribution there, Michelle. David's going to put you back in the waiting room in the meeting. We'll continue on YouTube. Thanks there, David. Okay, so that concludes our speakers on this item, and we move to the debate. So Councillor Edwards, please, to start the debate.
Thank you, Chair. This is a really difficult application, I think, because I can completely understand what they're trying to do, but the Crescent and the Headlands is a residential area. Now, I know that the argument is that a care home, they are residents, and I really understand that. But the Headlands area have had their fair share of businesses over the years, and it's not an area where businesses should be encouraged to be. So I'm really at cross paths, actually, whether this is right or wrong for that area. And I understand that the resident that has complained has quoted several different policies. And I know, Louise, through your presentation, which I thought was excellent, by the way, thank you very much for that, have gone through those policies. But I'm still not sure whether actually it is going against the Headlands area policy, which I believe it is. And so I'm kind of against this application at that moment on this part. The other thing I don't really understand also is about the knocking down of 3 buildings. It's kind of, you know, an area again that we're going to lose 3 residential houses, one of them which is a bungalow, much needed, much sought after. Why would we want people to knock down these residential houses? One of them to make a gateway to a car park. Now, forgive me if I am wrong, but that picture that you showed, they showed a great big tree in the middle of that access point. Are we saying that we're going to lose that tree as well if we agree to this application?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Louise, yep, did you want to clarify?
Yeah, in terms of the street tree, obviously it doesn't fall within the application area, it falls within the highway itself. But in terms of the plans, the street tree doesn't fall within the access point itself. So to my mind, it doesn't need to be removed to facilitate the access point. Now, obviously, to some extent, that is out of my control because it falls outside the planning remit, and obviously at any point in time that tree or those street trees could come down in theory because they fall within the highway and not obviously within the control of myself or Kettering per se. It would be a decision for the county council, but from the plans it doesn't fall within the access point itself.
Thanks for clarifying that. Louise and Councillor Adams, good evening to you. It looks like you've joined the meeting now. So because you missed the presentation, you won't be able to vote. You'll have to abstain on this one. Councillor Thurland, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll echo Scott's. You were very clear and concise, Louise. My concern is we're knocking 3 really good buildings down, especially one being the bungalow. And on page 30, I think I have to agree where it says, while the loss of 3 number existing open market will weaken the existing availability of private housing supply and is a material consideration. I'm really concerned about those 3 really nice Kettering style houses, if you like. And I can't get my head round where it's being offset by a comparison of an 8-bed units being equivalent to 5 additional new dwelling houses. I mean, I'm sure, you know, at the age I am, I'm going to be looking for nursing home one day, but I'm not so sure that in my mind now, we can equate these units being 5 additional dwellings. Also with the car park, staff car park, there's going to be comings and goings for, you know, quite some time, some hours during day and night with the changeover of staff. And as you said, it's going to be within the residence permit area. Does that mean then that the residents of the home can perhaps ask for permits for their visitors? Because that wouldn't seem fair. And I know it's happened in other places where we've had buildings go up within residential residence parking areas, and they've ended up getting parking permits. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Louise, do you want to come back?
Just in terms of, obviously, you know, I can't probably say much more about the policy aspects, and obviously, yeah, 3 dwellings are coming down as part of the proposal, and that's obviously very, very clear. And officers have taken a view that we consider that it is in accordance with policy, but obviously you'll weigh that up and make your decision on that point. Just in terms of the parking permits, unfortunately, again, that's not something I control in terms of permits and obviously how they are allocated. I would have thought, from a common sense point of view, that it is for residents and not for visitors. That wouldn't make any sense to me, because obviously there are across the headlands a mix or some various other uses, non-residential uses. And I wouldn't have thought that you could give parking permits out for those uses.
No, but you can have those scratch cards, can't you, for visitors?
So as I say, I can't speak for the people who approve permits, but I would have thought that, you know, visitors wouldn't be able to receive those, because where would that end?
Yeah, that is just a concern. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of concerns, really. One is obviously, that as my colleagues have already said, about the loss of what are family homes. And then to build on to a building that, if that was a house, we wouldn't pass it, because we've had something similar to that and it wasn't passed, and it actually went to the planning inspectorate and they didn't agree to knocking down a bungalow and a house in this area. So I don't see why it should be any different in Headlands area, especially when it is a very densely populated area which has massive problems with parking already. Access to the station is already horrendous and causes concerns for the residents. So to have that volume of traffic going down to a station which is very busy most of the day, and given the restrictions with COVID, I don't think it's a good idea adding even more people into a care home. That they're just having not very big rooms, whereas you've got 3 houses there. They're going to provide homes for families and allow independent living in a bungalow, and we're crying out for bungalows. So to remove one and to remove that garden space and just have a smaller space, and then to say, well, we're going to have these improvements, we're going to have a cinema room and a balcony. The balcony overlooks people's gardens, and And with due respect, you know, it's a care home. How many people are going to actually use a balcony when elderly people much prefer to have a garden? And they're going to lose that space. I know it says in here it's 0.62 or 62% or something. I can't remember in here somewhere. That is going to be an increase in the garden. Well, yeah, that's because you've taken 3 houses down. So I think if you look at the visual impact on page 32 and then page 33, I just don't think it accords with the Kettering Town Action Plan. And if you ask the Headlands Residents Association, I think they'd be, you know, I'm surprised that they haven't actually spoken, because this is not what they would require or would want. We spent a long time having to work with them, or wanting to work with them, I should say, to try and preserve their homes and give them the parking spaces so they could park outside their homes. So to have something like this, it's going to increase traffic, it's going to increase the visitors all hours of the day. And as I say, we're in a COVID world, which we're going to have to live with for, you know, some time to come. I think to acquiesce to having a bigger care home with more people in it is just asking for more problems, to be quite honest. And the loss of the homes is just, the 3 houses just really doesn't sit right with me, I'm afraid. Thank you, Chair.
Louise?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, just in terms of the Headlands Community Neighbourhood Area Association. We did consult them on this particular application and they've not provided any comments. So just a point of clarification. I don't think there was any sort of questions to come back on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Titcombe and Councillor Deary still have to speak. So I'm going to call Councillor Titcombe now, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's not too much to add to what the previous councillors have said. You'll be glad to know. The fact we're going to knock down 3 perfectly good dwellings just does not make sense to me. And we do need to remember we are charged with preserving the character of some of our places, and this is a good place to do that. So, you know, I'm not happy with this at all. So thank you, Chair. That's it, short and sweet.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Deary, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just get some clarification, please? Obviously, we're talking of knocking down a bungalow and 2 properties here. The bungalow appears to have a garage to it, but is there any off-road parking for the 2 houses? That's the first point. And the second point is, can you confirm to me that if this were to go ahead, is there additional spaces, and are those additional spaces for the new building for staff only?
Thank you, Councillor. Louise?
I believe that there isn't any off-road parking for those 2-storey dwellings. We can always go back to the photos just to have a look at those, but I believe there isn't, and it's on-street parking in that area. And the additional parking area is for staff only and not for visitors.
Okay. Now, if I might as well, as I understand it, visitors are allowed to park, but have to be given on-street permits for the day. I think that's how it works. So, okay. And the final one was on the balcony. Not too fussed. I looked at the drawings on here. The balcony does appear to be covered on both left and right by the building. So I hope I'm right on that. Do we have the size? Do you know what the size of the balcony is? Out of interest.
It's 32 square metres and it is enclosed on either side by the 2-storey building.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. And Louise, clarifying there. So we do have an officer's recommendation to approve the application, mindful of comments from colleagues. So if anything on the table were we minded to go against that, and obviously we'd need material reasons for doing so. So if there is nothing on the table, and with the recommendation to approve, I'm going to seek a proposer and seconder for that recommendation.
Chair, can I go to where, I think it was page 30, where it says the loss of the open market dwelling house is a material consideration. So I'd like to suggest that is a reason for...
Are you proposing an amendment to refuse, Councillor?
Yes.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair.
Councillor Edwards, okay. So loss of the dwelling houses is a material reason. Any other further reasons to?
Yeah, it goes against the local plan for the Headlands area.
It's somewhat out of character as well.
Out of character. Okay. Louise, do you want to offer further guidance, or are you happy with those reasons as they stand?
No, I think obviously, yeah, loss of the dwellings, out of character, so obviously doesn't preserve the character of the area in accordance with those policies of the development plan, including the AAP, which you've mentioned tonight. And obviously that's Save Local Plan as well, which you've mentioned. If I'm correct, if I'm not, please tell me.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara, so your hand is raised. Do you want to make one final point?
It was just the comments for the objector anyway. I think they can be included, which is, I think Louise is indicating anyway. Am I correct?
Thank you for that, Councillor. So we do now have a proposed seconded amendment to refuse the application on the table. With those reasons, I'm therefore going to ask Callum to conduct a vote on the amendment to refuse the application, not approve the application. Over to you, Callum.
Thank you, Chair. So if after I've called your name, if you could indicate if you are for or against the motion to refuse the application, or if you wish to abstain from the vote. Councillor Deering.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
For refusal of the application, please, Callum.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Titcombe.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Fairland.
For.
Thank you. And after that, Chair, there are 6 votes for the motion and 1 against.
Thank you. And Councillor Adams to abstain on that one.
Abstain, yeah.
So that application is therefore refused for those reasons outlined just a few moments ago. So we move to item 5.4, KET 2020-0339.1 Linklewood Avenue in Kettering. No update on this. Once again, Dave's going to pop the presentation on screen in a second. I'll just ask colleagues to just pop themselves on mute if they're not speaking. We've just got a bit of a rustling noise in the background. Just that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Sorry, we've got a speaker.
Yeah, the speakers always come after the presentation, Mark.
Sorry, not paying attention.
No problem. Yeah, we do have a speaker. He will follow after the report. So over to you for presentation. It's good to go.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So this is a site in North Kettering, existing business, existing business park. And you'll see from the plan there that it's sandwiched between some existing buildings, the petrol station to the north on that diagram, and hotel and pub at the southern end. The officer report looks at the fact that this area has had a outline permission for a number of years, but no business use under a B1 has come forward. So this is a proposal for a full application to infill this remaining piece of land for technically a B8 use, which is the distribution, but a very specific B8 use, namely for self-storage facility. Because of that reason, that addresses the highway issues, which I'll come to shortly. Next slide, please, David. Yeah, so this is the land. It's remained sort of fairly vacant and unkempt for quite a number of years. So the area itself, in the report, it's mentioned about its value as a in terms of any plants and so forth, and it's concluded there is no great value in that regard. Next report, next slide, please. So this is the size of the unit, and this is going to be located towards the bottom of the site, close to the A43, and you can see essentially it's a large rectangular shed building with some offices within. Next slide, please. So this is another detail, and I'd point out on this plan the access point, which is opposite the access point for the filling station on the north side. The Highway Authority did make a comment about these two access points being not sort of separated by a 20-metre offset, but it's been pointed out in the report and through consultation with the applicant that the speeds of vehicles going to the petrol station and indeed to this site would be actually quite slow, and it's considered that it wouldn't raise any significant highway concerns. The turning areas and the manoeuvring areas have also been demonstrated to be satisfactory. Just another point to note, towards the southern end, there's an area which is subject of a landscape scheme, and I'll come to that in a moment. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed plan, and the point to note here is that the colours have been toned down. One of the single objection we had from a resident of Kettering was in relation to the appearance of the building, and you can see that there's now only one horizontal yellow strip, which is sort of reflection of house colours for the proposed occupier of the building. And the next slide, please. So this was the original submission, which we thought was the appearance was out of keeping, and that's what's been superseded. So you can see the difference between what was eventually agreed with the planning officers and the applicant and what was initially put forward. Next slide, please. So this is a copy of the landscape proposals, which are in your pack, and although the detail is difficult to read, it's been the subject of consultation with the ecology unit at the county council, and they're satisfied that it's a suitable scheme for this site. Next slide, please. So here's some pictures to show you the context. You can see the nature of the site. It's currently undeveloped in the main. And in the background, you can see some of the existing buildings. Next slide, please. That's another shot of the site. Again, it's a very sort of simple piece of land within an existing range of business uses. Next slide, please. And that gives you an impression of where we are. In terms of height, the height of the building at its highest point is no higher than the hotel building, which is already existing close by. I think I'll leave the slides there, please, David, and go back to the landscape plan, if I may. Yeah. So to take you through the officer report, as I've said, the principle of development is found to be acceptable because A, it's already had an outline consent for business use B1. We've got a full application now for a B, technically a B8 use, but a Pacific B8 use. Excuse me. And the Highway Authority made it clear that in terms of self-storage unit, the manoeuvring and the dimensions would be acceptable for this type of use because of obviously the lower amount of traffic that would be generated compared to a normal distribution unit. So the principle is acceptable in terms of the joint plant course strategy, and that's identified in the council report. It's come to committee because of one objection from the resident, and those objections are set out on page 60 and 61 of the report, and I won't repeat those, but some of them are to do with the way it looks, and as we've discovered, that issue has been addressed through amendments. In terms of dealing with the landscaping, this scheme will provide a reasonable amount of landscape provision and also help in biodiversity, and that issue is addressed on page 66 of the committee report. I've said that the highway stuff has been addressed in terms of the use, and the Highway Authority have suggested that we, as a planning authority, we take a view on it, which is what we have done. But this is a solid proposal. It doesn't really raise any concerns or issues that can't be dealt with through the conditions that are proposed. So the officer recommendation is for approval.
Thank you very much for that presentation there, Peter. So we have one speaker on the item this evening, Christopher Dwan, who's agent for the applicant, who will be joining us shortly by video. Just connecting now. Good evening, Mr. Dwan. Can you hear us? You might need to unmute yourself to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We've reached the point in proceedings where you get to address the committee for 3 minutes, Mr. Dwan, so whenever you're ready.
Wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My client, Tonsley GS Limited, is delighted to have the opportunity to bring forward for development one of the final parcels within the Kettering Business Park. The site in question benefits from being a committed employment site, and as you have just heard, the principle of development is well established, even taking into account the self-storage use proposed. As a project team, we have worked closely with officers and would like to put on record our appreciation for their contribution in the overall iterative design process that has been followed. As detailed in the officer report and the presentation, the established buildings that surround the site have a strong and repetitive style, which we have responded to well. The monopitch design followed and use of subtle, discrete materials will ensure the building offers a contemporary and appropriate finish alongside the existing built form in and around Weekly Wood Avenue. The appropriateness of the technical delivery of the scheme has been well demonstrated as part of the application submission pack. Pertinently, there are no statutory objections in relation to key matters such as access, drainage, ecology, etc. In the case of ecology, my client is committed to following the relevant recommendations as set out in the Lockhart-Garrett report, such as the enhancement of the grassland with wildflowers, provision of bird boxes, provision of suitable gaps and fences to allow for hedgehog movements, etc. The efficient building design will be supported by key sustainable aspects such as electric vehicle charging points, indoor cycle store facilities, and so forth, to ensure it meets with the general sustainability requirements of the development plan policies. Although effectively a B8 use class, the trip generation stemming from a self-storage development is far more limited than standard B8, and the relevant access arrangements and parking configuration have been designed to reflect this. From this regard, the location of the point of access was important, as it allowed the building to be set back within the plot, providing a consistent building line alongside the adjacent established built form. In terms of the point of access, the relevant tracking exercises and supporting information provided by my client's highways consultants have demonstrated the appropriateness of the approach followed, which county highways have offered no objection to, subject to the imposition of the condition restricting standard B8 use in the future, which my client accepts. Ultimately, the scheme you have before you today offers an effective use of a site within a business park setting, following a design that is complementary to and consistent with the established development that has come before it. It is entirely appropriate when considered against the Council's development plan policies and also that of national policy. We accordingly request that you support the professional officer recommendation in this instance and grant planning approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your contribution this evening, Mr. Dwan. Dave's going to pop you back in the waiting room, and then you can continue to watch the meeting on YouTube.
Thank you.
There we go. So that concludes our speakers on this item. And currently we have no hands raised for the member debate. Councillor Thurland.
I'm really pleased. I mean, we've got to do something with this piece of land. I don't, when outline was given for the whole of the site for building and to be an industrial site, and I think I like the bit where they're going to step it back. I like the bit where it's going to be self-storage. I'd like to know what that's classed as, though. I presume it's Peter's idea that there's going to be less traffic because it won't be loads of lorries in and out all days and night. And I think, I don't think there's any reason to refuse this. I think, but going forward, I think we have to be more circumspect when agreeing outline permissions, especially in areas which we need to protect for our green agenda and commitments that we've made. But on this one, I like that they've toned the colour down. It will use that piece of land. I like the hedging and its step back. I think it's a very good report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor. Did you want to comment on those points there, Peter?
No, nothing much to add other than say what the agent has said is in line with the recommendation, and it's you know, it's completely in harmony with our policy, and this is the correct proposal for this site.
Thank you. Councillor Deering, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm for this actually. My comments really along the fact that B8 is probably not quite the right expression in a way for where it is. The fact that the building is set back is really nice. I've used self-storage myself in the past, so I know that you're not going to have 100 million trucks and that going in and out. And it is obviously almost opposite some rather large B8 warehouses itself. So I'm more than happy with that. And it'd be nice to see that last bit of land taken. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor O'Hara, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question, really. Peter, can I ask the height of the building? It says it's you know, the same as the hotel, which is obviously over the road from it, but it's obviously a lot higher than Starbucks and the petrol station. So I just wondered, because of the appearance, I know they've toned it down and just put a single yellow line in there, but because it's near to a hotel and it's near a very busy main road and obviously the police station, is it not going to still be a bit distracting? Because that's one of the things we've tried to get rid of by our roadsides is things that are distracting. And you know, there's a lot of warehouse units that are built of grey and white and have the blue, so it's an iridescent colour almost. So it doesn't reflect onto the road, because I know that they've built 2 warehouses not far from here, and sometimes when the sun's going down or when the sun's coming up, the glare off it is quite harsh, really, and for some people probably quite dangerous. So because it is, I know it's set back, but I still think that the colour is just too much, and it needs to blend a little bit more. And the other thing I wanted to ask, it said that it's going to be securely fenced. Nothing around there is. It's all quite open plan. And indeed, the offices that are there that are by the hotel, so sort of more towards where you turn off to go through Walkden Weekly, etc. Those buildings there are quite pleasantly constructed. I know this is a different kind of unit. It's storage. They're going to be storage units, but I just wondered whether that fencing, is it going to be? I'm not quite sure what kind of fencing it is. It says it's going to be. It has to be because of what the nature of the building. But do you know what kind of fencing it is? I tried to look at it and I can't remember what it says now.
Thanks.
Palisade fencing would be used. It would sit within the existing and proposed hedgerows and therefore would be softened by the landscaping.
Exactly. And the fencing is conditioned anyway.
Yeah, I can see that.
So the detail will be approved, but it's not meant looking like
What I meant, is it going to be that horrible concrete kind of stuff, or is it just going to be something that blends in? You know, the modern fencing that kind of blends in with the environment. That's what I was getting at.
Well, I think that's the idea. It will be sufficient and secure, but it will tie in with the existing or proposed landscaping around the edge of the site. In terms of the colour, as I explained in the presentation, some degree of compromise has been reached in regard to that, and the thin orange strip, you know, the officers have considered it very carefully. There's no evidence that it would be a distraction to anybody other than other than who chooses to look at it. And there's nothing from the police or anyone else, highways, to say it would distract from safety. And the officer view is that the changes made are sufficient on the one hand allow for a sort of corporate colour to be included within the building, but at the same time, with the design and the shapes of the building that's being proposed, offer something which is acceptable and visually in harmony. So the officer view is that they've made significant effort to come up with something which we consider acceptable.
No, thank you for that, Peter. I do appreciate that you know what you've got now is 1,000 times better than what was proposed. So I appreciate, you know, the work that you and other officers have done to negotiate that change. But it was just a question, really, just to see whether we could soften it somewhat more. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Peter. And finally, Councillor Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just a quick comment actually about that you mentioned about the speed of traffic going out of the petrol station and into the proposed building. Did they take into account the Starbucks actually that is down there as well? Because I think that is the entrance and exit to the drive-through there as well. Has that been taken into consideration?
It has, yes, because all the traffic speeds in relation to those units close by have been taken into account. And as I said, because of the relative nature of the accesses and how far apart they are, traffic is slowing down. So it is considered to be quite acceptable.
Thank you very much indeed. So no further hands wishing to comment. So we have a recommendation to approve the application before us. So can I seek a proposer and seconder for that recommendation to approve, please? Councillor Titcombe, Councillor Edwards, thank you. And Callum, can you conduct the vote, please, on the application to approve?
Thank you, Chair. So if after I've called your name, if you could indicate if you're for or against the officer's recommendation to approve the application, or if you wish to abstain from the vote. Starting with Councillor Adams.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
For, please.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Titcombe.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Fairland.
For.
Thank you. That decision is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Callum, so that application is therefore approved. So we turn now to item 5.6, KT 2020-0580 82 Patchy Road in Kettering. No, actually there is, forgive me, there is an update on this item. So while David shares the screen, did the officer wish to read that update out? Or I can.
A very short update on this one, Chair. Just to say that comments have been received by one of the ward councillors for where the application site is. And that's just to say that they fully support the objections made by number 80 Patchy Road, which are detailed in the report.
Thanks, Louise. Just waiting for Dave to pop the presentation on screen. Thanks, David. There we go. So that is good to go, Louise, when you're ready.
Thank you. So the application site is 82 Patchy Road in Kettering. And here's the location plan. If we could move to the next slide, please. And the next slide will show the block plan of the proposal. The application is for a single storey side and rear extension. And as you can see, that wraps around the side and then along the entire width of the property. It's also proposed to put 3 roof lights in the rear roof plane. In terms of what's already on site, you'll see in a moment with the photos that there's an existing garage on the side adjacent to number 80 Pikeshire Road. And there's also a conservatory on the rear, which is adjacent to the other neighbouring property, number 84. And those 2 elements, which are currently on site, will be taken down to make way for this extension. Just to let you know what the green dot, sorry, indicates, and that is a kitchen window at ground floor level that sits within that side elevation of number 80. There is also a glazed front entrance to number 80 as well on that side elevation, and I'll come back to that during the course of the presentation. You'll note in the report that number 80 has objected to the scheme for a number of reasons which are set out within the report in the comments section. And some of those comments relate to loss of light and overshadowing impacts on their property. Just in terms of the extension, obviously it is a large extension, which you'll see from that block plan. But in relation to the size of the plot itself, it is, we consider, to be a proportionate extension when you actually look at the overall size of the plot that the application property sits within. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Excuse me. Thank you. So this is the existing elevations and floor plans for the property. So as I mentioned, if you look at the floor plans, there's a conservatory which sits adjacent to number 84 Pikeshire Road, which will be removed. And on the other side, adjacent to number 80, which is obviously registered concerns with us, there's a garage which will also be removed as part of the proposal. Have the next slide, please. So you'll see from the floor plans and the elevations, as I say, it's a single story extension which wraps around that entire side of the property, then projects back into the rear garden, and then wraps around the rear and the entire width at the rear of that property. And then you'll note, obviously, the roof lights that I've already mentioned. As I said, the garage will be removed that's existing on site. And it's the side that's at the bottom of the screen, which is adjacent to the objector at number 80, just to make that clear to you. If we could go to the next slide, please. So these are the photos of the site on the left, and then we've got number 80, which is on the right-hand side of the photo. If we go to the next slide. So this is a closer up shot of number 80, and you'll see on the photo a small gate, but then just in front of that, a little sort of canopy which leads to that access entrance into the property that I mentioned earlier. So if we go to the next photo, please. So this is a photo taken within the application site. So the existing conservatory and the garage on the left of the photo, as I say, will be removed. And number 80 is on the left of the shot, adjacent to that existing garage. We'll talk a little bit more about the impacts on that property, but just to mention number 84, which sits on the right-hand side of that photo. Obviously, there's an existing conservatory there which will be removed, but the replacement single-story extension will be approximately the same sort of footprint, albeit that the extension will be in parallel to that boundary rather than obviously the shape of the conservatory as it is there. But there are no additional impacts considered to be upon that neighbour, because there is that same relationship with an extension that is already in place. The key impacts in this case, as detailed in the report, are the impacts on number 80, which is on the left of the photo. If we could go to the next slide, please. And again, this is a closer up view of that existing garage that will be removed, and then number 80 that sits adjacent to that. And the next photo, please. This is a photo taken from the rear garden of number 80, and this is looking across the application site, and you'll see the red brick side of that garage that's going to be removed and then replaced. Next slide, please. And this is an internal photo taken from within the kitchen area of number 80, looking directly, this is the view directly out onto the application site, where you'll see the garage on the right hand side where the extension will sit. There will remain a 2-metre gap between the extension and the property at number 80 Pikeshire Road. The height of the extension will be 2.5 metres to the eaves. And then it's also important to note that the roof will be a hipped roof sloping away from the neighbour at that point, and then that goes up to 3.1 metres up to its maximum height. Obviously, officers have set out the impacts on residential amenity on that particular occupier, and it's considered that relationship is acceptable. And obviously you've got that existing building and that existing relationship that's already there with the 2-storey property, and it's not considered that the addition of that single-storey extension will have an unacceptable impact on that neighbouring property. So there are conditions recommended to ensure that no further openings can be inserted within the side elevation or roof of the extension, but it is recommended for approval tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation there, Louise. So we have one speaker on this item, Paul Brogan, who's the agent for the applicant. He'll be joining us by video shortly. We'll just go through the usual process of letting him into the meeting. Just connecting to his audio there.
Mr. Brogan, can you hear us? You need to unmute.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. You've got 3 minutes to address the committee whenever you're ready, sir. Mr. Brogan?
Bear with me a second. I haven't muted my other one. Sorry.
All right.
No problem. If you could just indicate when you're ready to go, then we'll know where you are.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Thank you very much for granting my right to speak on behalf of my parents who reside in number 80 Pikeshire Road. I'll keep it brief because I believe the officers have outlined all of the issues that I'm going to mention anyway. But basically, I'd like to object to the application for a single-storey side and rear extension to number 2 on number 82 Pikeshire Road on the following material planning conditions. The proposed extension would make a massive difference to the daylight and sunlight in the kitchen and the whole of the east side of number 80. Although the planning officer mitigates this assertion, when looking at the plans, especially the proposed garage side elevation, it is clear in my view the extension will overshadow and overbear number 80 Pikeshire Road. The removal of the non-protected hedge, as it's called in the report, will, I believe, have a significant impact on both noise and vehicle pollution from the very busy Pikeshire Road. The proposal to completely wrap around to the front elevation means the replacement of garage and conservatory is not a true representation of the facts of this application. As a fallback position, could the extension only extend as far as the current garage footprint, as this would significantly reduce the height, bulk and appearance of the extension, reducing the effect on surrounding properties, particularly number 80. Many thanks for your attention. That's all I have for you at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Brogan. Don't going to pop you back in the waiting room and you can watch the rest of the meeting on YouTube.
Thank you.
So before we go to the debate, it's clear that he wasn't the agent of the applicant. By his comments there, it sounds more like a third-party objector, so apologies, that's an error on my sheet, but...
we haven't checked it, Jerry. It does appear that he registered as the agent for the applicant, so I'm not quite sure what's happened.
Not quite sure. Perhaps he ticked the wrong box in the form, but clearly speaking in objection, not for the application. Okay, so Councillor Edwards, please start the debate.
Thank you, Chair. I do think that whole wraparound is kind of like a really big for that kind of building, and I do feel sorry for the people living in number 80, because it will mean that they lose completely everything. If we go back to one of the first pictures, Louise, that you, I think it was the plan actually, rather than not a picture, and to show it almost dwarfs number 80, and it's almost like it's trapped. And I think that if I lived in number 80, I think I'd feel claustrophobic looking out of my window onto that. Now, I know you say that there's 2 meters distance, but and I know also that you say in the report that the kitchen isn't deemed an area perhaps where you rest or relax, but nonetheless, it is an area that some people spend a lot of time in, and should be considered that way. And I just think the application to extend this is just too big, and completely overshadows number 80.
Thank you for that, Councillor Edwards. Louise, did you want to comment on his comments there?
I think it was more comments and questions, unless there's anything specific you want me to come back on, but I think it's more of a comment that, yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thurling, please.
Yeah, Louise, can we go back to the picture that showed looking out of number 80's kitchen window, please? Could we just have a look at that? And then while we're looking, on the back page of our papers, there's, I know, yeah, that one, yeah. So the extension's coming all the way along there from the, and I know what you're saying is there's 2 meters, but that's not an awful lot when it comes to having light in your window. But on the back page, if you could leave that there, on the back page, it says the proposed, on the 2 detail plans, is the one on the left the side that's going to face number 80, please?
Yes, it's the top left, so the proposed garage side elevation that will face number 80. So there's at the bottom where it says bedroom, office, shower room, cloaks and utility, what side is that going to be on? That's all on number 80's side. The long proposed section is adjacent to number 80, and the very short section at the top is adjacent to the other neighbour.
Yeah, so when that's built, you're going to have a bedroom office coming out, the shower room, and I'm not sure where the ventilation is going to come out, because that's going to come straight out towards number 80, and the utility room, is that right?
Yes, all of that will be on that.
Yeah, I think compared to what they've got now, I quite agree with Councillor Edwards. This is rather a large difference from what they've got now, and I think it will be a little overbearing coming all the way down there. While you don't have a right to sight, but you do have a right to light, I think, and the amenity it's going to spoil with having those other rooms facing onto number 80, I think that's quite important, something to take into account. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor O'Hara, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to concur with what my previous councillors have said, but also that I think kind of policy 8 really does have have a bearing on this, in terms of it says the joint core strategy seeks to protect quality of life and safe, healthier communities by ensuring new development does not result in an unacceptable impact on the amenities of our future occupiers or neighbouring properties. And I think this has got a massive impact on the neighbouring property. I think it comes far too far around. It's far too big for that kind of house in that area. And you know, I think really the impact for the future would be too great for the people living next door, and for anybody who wishes to buy that property in future years. I think they would find that quite daunting, because although there's a 2 metre gap, I still think it encroaches on the amenity of the people living next door. So that's what I want to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Titcombe, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's strange. If this proposal would be for a two-storey extension, then yes, some real objections, but it is just a single-storey extension and with a hip roof. I don't think it's going to make such a great deal of difference to light or sunlight, as they say. So basically, I'm in favour of this. The 2 metre gap, yes. Should try stepping out of my front door. I think Councillor Thurland knows that quite well. I don't have 2 metres, but that's beside the point. I do sympathise with Aid. It's going to be an extension, and then you will look at the longer wall. But under the sense of it, no. 2-storey, I would object this. I can't find an objection for it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Titcombe. And finally, we've got Councillor Deering.
Councillor, you're muted.
Is that better?
There we go, Councillor. Yeah, good to go.
Louise, can I just ask you, would you put me the picture up again of the kitchen window looking out at the applicant, please? That Leslie saw, if you don't mind. Now, on the right, you've got the garage. I'm just looking at the details here. Can you just confirm for me that the roof to the new extension, because it is a single story, does it end about the same height as that garage roof as you can see it now on the picture?
No, probably the best reference point I can give for the eaves of the extension is that black bit on the side of the elevation there on the photo.
Yeah.
So that'll be for the eaves, but then you've obviously got then the hipped roof sloping away, and if you look at the back page of the papers for the elevations, and the top left, the garage side elevation plan, you'll see it slopes up and then goes up to sort of halfway between the 2 windows.
Yes, so the sloping end as it comes down and it ends up at the border of the neighbours is about the height of the black venue.
Approximately, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, happy with that, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify that? You said that's the eaves, isn't it, where that black mark was? That's not the roof, is it? The roof actually goes further up nearly to the bottom of that window. Thank you.
Yeah, it's sort of the very top of the roof where it slopes up and finishes is approximately, I would say, between those 2 windows. So it doesn't go right up to the bottom of that.
I can see on here. Yeah,
approximately on that photo.
Okay, thank you for that. So thank you for.
Sorry, may I just ask one more question?
Point there, Councillor.
Louise, you know where it's coming down, where you said that black thing, is that not the flue for the central heating? So therefore, will that flue then be moved over and come this side? So the flue will then come out onto the neighbour? I know that's illegal. So I'm wondering, do we know where that's going to be recited? Because obviously it can't stay there if the bill's coming down there.
I don't know where it'll be recited to. Unfortunately, I haven't got that information.
But they wouldn't be allowed, would they, to have it on the new extension on the outer wall where there's only 2 metre gap between that house and
they couldn't have it where it overhangs onto a neighbouring property, because you'd obviously need then the permission of the adjacent owner to have anything on their property side, which obviously they won't be granted that permission. And just to clarify on that point, obviously there's a bit in the report about guttering, because originally when the application came in, there was some lack of clarity around whether guttering was overhanging, and that's been amended, so everything is within the application site.
Okay, thanks for clarifying there. Is that Councillor?
Chair, can I just ask then?
Can I ask you just to make some final remarks, and I'm keen to move to the vote, please.
Okay, sorry, Chair. Can we put a condition in there then about where it would be cited if people are minded to pass it?
I would say not, because it would fall outside the planning remit to ask for that location detail.
Okay, thanks for that. So we do have a recommendation to approve the application before us. I've heard mixed comments from colleagues, so if anyone is minded to propose an amendment, now's your chance.
Yeah, Chair, can I propose an amendment that we reject the application, please?
Do you have a seconder, please? Thank you for that, Councillor Thurland. So Councillor Edwards proposed Councillor Thurland to second, and the reasons I've heard are impacts on the amenity of the neighbour, policy 8, over development possibly. Did you want to add any further reasons for refusal to that list? Or?
No, I think that really covers it, actually.
Okay, thank you. So we have a amendment to refuse, not approve the application. For those reasons stated, Louise, did you wish to comment or add anything to that before we go to the vote?
I'd just like to be clear. So obviously during the course of your debate, you've mentioned some specific things around amenity in terms of overshadowing, overdevelopment, being overbearing. And I just want to clarify with you whether that forms part of your reason for refusal, or you're just wording it in terms of impact on amenity. If I could just have that clarified, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Councillors, did you want to? Councillor Edwards, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think both, actually. If you want to word it in both, you know, it is overbearing on the area and the amenities for next door neighbour number 80.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara, is that your hand raised or is that from before?
No, it is raised. Just, Louise, would it not just all fall under 80? The fact that it's the impact of the amenity on the amenities of future occupiers, neighbouring properties, the quality of life and safer, healthier, would that?
It does. It's just whether you want to be more specific about the actual the parts of that impact on amenity, whether you want to mention if it's overbearing or overshadowing. Well, if you do, we'll keep it very general, but it's just if I can have that clarified, so when I'm drafting the reason, I know exactly what you would like within that.
Okay, so sorry, Chair, what have we got already? Is it overbearing and overshadowing? Is that what you're saying, Louise? And then
those are the two things.
About right to light, I know it's not a planning consideration as such. Is that there's two terminologies for that, isn't there?
We sorry, Chair.
Sorry, Louise. Yeah.
We can obviously put in about loss of light, overshadowing, it being overbearing, and you did mention it being overdevelopment, but it's whether you want to put that element in or not.
I think we would be more happier if it didn't go right up the whole length of that. I think it's that although you think, oh, it's only a kitchen and that, but people spend an awful lot of time, if you're anything like me, still at the kitchen sink. So I think the light and what the impact, I think, of the whole of that side is going to have on the neighbour, I think is too much.
Thank you. James, did you want to come up?
Sorry, just in relation to right to light and kind of overbearing, given it's a one-storey, dwelling extension, and these have been, kind of permitted elsewhere in the borough in that kind of form. I think you can put that in as a reason for refusal, but I think it would be hard to justify and sustain that at an appeal. But that's up to you to decide. It is a relatively low-lying, so other reasons for refusal, might be better.
One final point, Councillor O'Hara, and then I'm going to move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, is it then better, or Louise, or even James, is it then better to actually change it and say that we would prefer it if it was a smaller size that wasn't so overbearing, that would be, is that something that can go back? I know it's not a planning consideration as such, but as a way forward.
That would, I presume, have to be a whole new application.
Yes, yeah. I think you need to really make a decision on this application, and obviously they've got then the option to either appeal that or potentially come back in with a revised scheme if they wanted to obviously look at amendments to what they've proposed if indeed it is refused.
Okay, thank you for that. So we've got a set of reasons there listed and discussed. So I'm now going to ask Callum to conduct a vote on the amendment to refuse. not approve the application for all those reasons stated and discussed just a moment ago.
Thank you, Chair. So if after I've called your name, if you could indicate if you are for or against the motion to refuse the application, or if you wish to abstain from the vote. Again, starting with Councillor Adams.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley. Councillor Rowley.
Sorry, pressing the wrong button. Against.
Against, thank you. Councillor Titcombe.
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Fairland. Thank you. That was 3 votes for refusal, Chair, and then 5 against.
Thank you, sir. Amendment to refuse falls. So just to clarify, would I need to hold another vote on the substantive motion? Yep, David's nodding. Okay. So we have a officer's recommendation to approve, not refuse, obviously, as originally stated. Do we need another proposer and seconder? Yes, I guess we do. Do we have a proposer and seconder for that? Councillor Rowley and Councillor Adams. Okay. So Callum, now pleased to convert to vote on the officer's recommendation to approve the application substantive recommendation.
Thank you. So this is for the officer's recommendation to approve. Again, starting with Councillor Adams.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Titcombe.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Fairland.
Against.
Thank you. That's 5 votes for the officer's recommendation, Chair, and 3 against.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Callum, that application is therefore approved.
Chair, before we go to the next one, I think it might be worth pointing out the time. We've currently done 3 applications and we're at 7:30. If we carry on the same trajectory, we're still going to be sat here at 9 o'clock. So I don't want to seem like the Time Lord, but we need to
No, I agree.
Move things on a little bit more swiftly than we have done thus far.
And is everyone happy to continue and yeah, concise as stated before that? That'd be appreciated. So that turns us to item 5.1, KT 2020-0214, Hanwood Park, parcel R20, Barton Road, Landoff in Kettering. No update on that one. And presentation is to pop up very shortly. Thank you, David. That is good to go. Sean, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. The application seeks reserved matter approval for 167 dwellings. The site consists of parcel R20 associated with Hanwood Park Sustainable Urban Extension, Landoff, Barton Road, Kettering. The parcel R20 is a 4-hectare rectangular site to the western edge of the Hanwood Park development. The site is indicated by the round red line on this plan in the context of the wider Hanwood Park development. To the north is the Taylor Wimpey parcel R19, which is currently being built. There is a neighbouring unbuilt residential development parcel to the south and a further district centre parcel to the east, which is also unbuilt. Next slide, please. The site will be served from the internal development road, which connects the new access E road interchange close to the junction of Barton Road and Walkton Lane. The proposed linear park lining the distributor road encloses the site's northern boundary, which you can see here above the red line, and that is also underway. Next slide, please. The site is enclosed by the rear garden boundaries of Barton Road and Grendon Drive properties to its western edge. The application seeks reserved matter approval for 167 dwellings arranged in a geometric layout with a street hierarchy including a primary street which provides site access through the linear park and through the site to adjacent parcels to the east and to the south. The other roads and the mews arrangements towards the centre of the site provide the secondary and tertiary streets. Access is shown as being retained to a paddock to the site's southwest corner. A pedestrian cycle link is proposed to the southeast corner of the site, which will give access to the adjacent district centre proposed and the Hayfield Cross School, which is away to the east. Whilst you will see elements of frontage parking within the layout, these have been integrated to avoid opposing areas of frontage parking either side. In the mews areas, frontage parking has been provided sufficiently forward of the dwellings to enable provision of a green defensible strip between the front of the house and the parking, with planting between the spaces. The proposal resists a dominance of frontage parking in the proposal when considered as a whole. Now we'll look at some of the surrounding properties to the western edge. The closest back-to-back arrangement with neighbours is between 11 Grendon Drive and the proposal's plot 14, which is to the centre left of the plan. 16 Grendon Drive, which is just below number 11, is the closest neighbour to the boundary, with the rear elevations facing the rear elevations on plots 16 and 17, which are at a distance of nearly 13 metres. However, the side elevation of 16 Grendon Drive faces and has small non-habitable rooms opening in that facing elevation. The dwellings on plots 1 and 8 to the top left-hand corner are orientated so that their side elevations face the rear boundaries and therefore don't have any upper floor windows other than those serving non-habitable rooms. The rear elevation of the dwellings along that western boundary are at least 11 metres from the boundaries of the Grendon Road, the Grendon Drive and Barton Road property. Next slide, please. This planting plan shows small areas of formal and informal planting, notably on the approach, which creates a pleasant green aspect when entering the development. There is provision of some wide verges and incidental planting areas at corners. The planting of trees is also achievable within the mews areas between parking spaces and on the western boundary with the adjacent neighbours. The site along its northern boundary will also significantly benefit from the proposed linear park, which will provide an attractive planted northern edge. Next slide, please. This plan shows the materials palette distribution and includes light and dark bricks and the distribution of stone dwellings at key viewpoints. Next slide, please. This shows the 34 affordable houses in 2 clusters, which is preferred by affordable housing providers and includes shared ownership and rental properties. Next slide, please. This street plan shows a consistency in elevation and roof design and fenestration across the site, with a simple traditional rural domestic vernacular approach adopted, including the provision of chimneys, porches, and detailing to windows. This approach is considered to be correct for this parcel as it respects its proximity to listed buildings and Barton Seagrave Conservation Area, which are less than 500 metres to the west of the site, and is also consistent with the overarching design code in the outline that places the site in the Barton character area. Next slide, please. This is the garages. Their dimensions accord with local highway standards. Next slide, please. This shows the proposal in the context of the linear park. The site is accessed via the road to the far right of this image. Next slide, please. This is the same linear park further eastwards, with the site access to the left of the upper image. Some of these are starting to go in, which I'll show you some photographs in a minute. The link to the far right of the top image is the access to the adjacent district centre, and that is also now being constructed. And again, I'll show you some photos of that in a minute. Next slide, please. This photo is taken from close to the site along outside of its northern boundary to the northern extent of the linear park and faces access E. And it shows its progress, and it's pretty much open and nearly constructed. Next photograph, please. This is taken from the same position, swung in the opposite direction, and you can see the Taylor Wimpey site progressing on the left-hand side with the linear park on the right. Next photograph, please. This is further along that road, and where you see there the access to the site with the Taylor Wimpey development now on your right-hand side. And you can see the progress being made on the linear park. You can see some retaining walls and footpaths going in there. Next slide, please. This is taken from the access road, looking eastwards along the linear park. You can see the footpaths going in there. And to the right is the hedgerow, which forms the boundary of the site that will be retained. Next photograph, please. Now we walk into the site. This is a long distance view taken from within the site facing the rear boundaries of the neighbours. The side gable elevation of 16 Grendon Drive, which you recall I mentioned the side facing elevation and the non-habitable room windows earlier, is towards the centre of the image, with 11 and 12 Grendon Drive to the right of that with their back elevations facing the proposal. To the far left of the image is the stone dwelling at 134A Barton Road, which also backs onto the development. Next slide, please. This is taken further southwards, facing the same western boundary from a similar distance. And again, you can see that 134A Barton Road towards the centre and the paddock, which will retain access to the left-hand side of that image. Next photo, please. This is taken from the site's southern boundary, looking southwards over the adjacent unbuilt residential parcel. And you can see the Persimmon parcel off Cranford Road in the distance. Next slide, please. This is taken close to the site's southeastern corner, close to where the pedestrian link would be to the district centre parcel, which is to the east. And you can see Hayfield Cross School in the distance there. Next slide, please. As we continue our walk around the site, this is taken from the northeastern corner of the site. And you can see where you see that van, that is where the access to the adjacent district centre parcel would be achieved. Next slide, please. This last image is taken from the same position facing towards the site's northern edge and shows the significant hedgerow, which is to the boundary with the linear park, and it shall be retained, as I mentioned earlier. The key issues of this proposal are compliance with the outline planning permission, its build quality, impacts on residential amenity, highway safety and sustainability. On those, the submission complies with the constraints and provisions of the outline planning permission, including its approved design code, and provides a well-planned, high-quality layout and design that creates landscape interest and has taken opportunities available to provide green streets fitting of its suburban location and fulfills its design code requirements as a Barton character area. The proposal protects neighbours' residential amenity and provides good standards of amenity for future occupiers. There are no local highway authority objections, with the proposal providing enough parking provision, safe connected accesses and road arrangements, and therefore would not prejudice highway safety. The proposal represents a good value return when considering energy performance and water usage efficiency, including a 10% betterment over building regulations in terms of energy performance. There are no statutory consultee objections to the proposal, and the third-party points of objections have been addressed in the relevant sections throughout the reports. In conclusion, the proposal accords with the outline consent and is consistent with local plan policy and national planning policy framework. As such, the application is acceptable and recommended for approval, subject to the imposition of the conditions laid out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sean, for that. So we have no speakers on this item. So over to you, members. Anyone wishing to comment for the debate? Councillor Rowley, please.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned about the garages, but there's no dimensions on the council's documents online. So can you tell me what the dimensions of the garage are? Because they look pretty narrow.
Do you need time to do that, Sean?
No, that's fine. Yeah, they are a bit difficult to make out on here, but yeah, they are on here. The single garages, 3.3 metres in width, 6 metres long. The double garages are the 6 metres long, and it will be 6.6 metres in width. So yeah, they accord with the standards set out by local highway authority standards.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, yeah, thanks for that, Sean. Yeah, I mean, on the map they look pretty narrow that they wouldn't fit a car in, but they are big enough for a car to go in. So I'm happy with the parking. I can't think of anything else really to object on it, to be honest.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor O'Hara, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a question in terms of the sustainability of this development? Because I can see that there's a third-party objection here, and there's quite a few things listed in there. So I kind of looked a lot deeper into this, and I am concerned about the parking for the area. It's near the neighbourhood amenity. It's not far from the school. Yet you've got 3 and 4 bedroom properties that haven't got any garages. I don't understand that. You've got properties coming out onto the road, which is going to be the main route into the area. So I don't quite understand that. But what's even more worrying is that there's no provision there. You've mentioned that there's a 10% rate for the sustainability, but actually there isn't, because there's very few properties with solar PV. There's no ground source heat pumps. In 5 to 10 years, you're looking at the government wants to phase out gas, yet they've all got gas and no air source or any other mechanical kind of heat pumps. And I think really that if you look at the sustainability statement, it's on now. On page 14, the sustainable buildings, there's a comment on about there's chimneys, but the chimneys aren't even built of brick. They're built of some other material, which isn't exactly eco-friendly. But if you've got a chimney, I don't see the point. They're a bit old-fashioned, but if you've got a chimney, then it reduces the amount of solar panels, the amount of power that you can get out of your solar panels. So you're negating against it. And I just think the development isn't really fit for purpose. I don't think it's fit for the future. You're certainly not future-proofing. And I just feel that it hasn't been well thought out. This is something that came to planning years ago, and the houses are not really, they say they're 3 or 4 bedroom houses, yet some of them are only 2 with an office space, or they're listed as 3 bedroom with an office space. So are they 4 bedroom? There is a distinct lack of soakaways, and there isn't any off-street parking. There isn't enough of off-street parking. I am worried that it is a main route in, and there's just not a lot of off-street parking. I think it really constitutes overdevelopment. And there is really no information about sustainability. If you look at the sustainability statement, I think it was It doesn't confirm the measures that will be implemented to protect against the climate change and reducing the future carbon footprint of the development. The reduction of the carbon production, which is above the present day requirements and flexible enough to adapt to future needs of climate change. And it doesn't provide any actual guaranteed practices which will be adopted by Bellway.
Thanks, Councillor. Do you want to clarify on those points, Sean?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Quite like to come back on. In terms of parking, the single bedroom units, the flats of which there are 8 have 1 space, dedicated space off street plus visitor space. The smaller of the dwellings have 2 off street parking spaces. The larger dwellings, 3 to 4, have 3 off street parking spaces. There's also 39 visitor spaces as well. This is considered to be enough parking provision and satisfies the local highways authority. In terms of the, I'll deal with the overdevelopment issue. When Hanwood Park was originally given outline approval, each parcel was given was given a budget in terms of how many houses it was expected to provide, and this meets that requirement. And actually, I think it's created a good, sensible, logical layout to provide those houses, and I don't see as overdevelopment. In terms of the offices that have been created that form part of the 3 and 4 bedroom units, that has come about partly in response to the COVID, actually, because it gives scope for occupiers to change the use of that small habitable room upstairs, whether it be as an office, potentially a nursery for a small child. So it gives some scope for flexibility to occupiers. The specific issue with regards chimneys, GRPs, that type of chimney system is not something that I would want to see. Visually, I don't think that complete system looks great, which is why there's a condition on requiring architectural detail associated with the chimneys, where I'd want to see at least brick slips there. In terms of whether or not they're appropriate as a design, I think that they are fit for this character area. And in terms of the wider sustainability issue, what I'd prefer to do is, on this occasion, just kind of go over part of my report, page 15 on the agenda item. And this kind of picks up some issues such as soakaways, for instance. All the dwellings will have access to secure cycle storage, shall connect to the wider site's sustainable urban drainage system. So yes, each dwelling may not have its own soakaway, but the site as a whole does, and is designed to minimise the risk of overheating by considering UK climate projections. There is a balance to be struck between achieving carbon neutrality and the delivery of needed homes on a large scale. The proposal, together with the delivery of other parcels, strikes that balance mainly through its fabric-first approach and a deliverable at the point of construction, and in a way that ensures that the constructed dwellings achieve 10% higher than building regs for the lifetime of the development. The buildings built, therefore, as part of this development, achieve better energy performance than most dwellings built elsewhere in the borough, and improve significantly on established dwellings' energy performance ratings. This holistic approach across the entire Hanwood Park development will result in massive energy performance gains than otherwise may be achieved through a standard house build without the energy performance requirements secured in the outline permission. Hope that answers. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Sean. So I'm going to
come back.
Can
Sean?
you give me a very quick point, Councillor? We're rapidly approaching 8 o'clock. So if you just.
Well, I think this is more important than the time, if I might say, Chair, because this is people's future, and this is the homes they're going to have to live in. Yes, I agree we need houses, but not houses that are just going to be boxes that aren't fit for the future. Sean, you say that there are soakaways for the site, but given that we've got a rising water table, it would be far more beneficial and efficient to have soakaways for each home. As regards the garages, I looked at this, and the garages, there's something like 116. Of the 21 of the 116 3-bedroom houses and 19 of the 22 4-bedroom houses have a garage. So the rest is all going to be on-street parking. That's a concern. But the biggest concern is this thing about the 10% energy saving. That's to do with the water. That is nothing to do with the heating. So I don't see that covers the site. That's just paying lip service to it. And it's not a sustainable development. So, Chair, I can't agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. James, did you wish to comment?
Yeah, I don't mind Sean coming back in on this, but it is something that we kind of try to address every time that we come to committee. Unfortunately, the government hasn't given us the tools with which to, ensure that we can get to net zero carbon for new housing at the present time. So once the government introduces its future homes standards through building regulations, then we will be able to enforce the requirements of these standards. But in terms of planning legislation, the Code for Sustainable Homes was kicked out back in 2015 or whenever that was, and that was a progression towards net zero carbon for homes. And there was never a one size fits all approach in relation to the technologies that you had to use. You could mix those technologies in order to bring the technology of the house and the carbon footprint to the required level. So I think, in terms of the progression of housing that we are consenting, we are improving that as opposed to current building regulation standards. It's not going to be carbon neutral or carbon zero at the present time, but the planning system doesn't allow us to do that, and our local plan policies don't allow us to do that either. So I think we have to accept that this is not going to be perfect, but we're moving in the right direction, and that when we get the wherewithal in relation to building regulations, we should move on significantly, hopefully. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you for that. Louise, did you wish to make a final point, and then with no one else wishing to speak?
Yeah, it's just a very, very quick point just about the energy performance. And in terms of the outline permission, there's a requirement for 10% betterment over building regs in terms of the energy performance of all the dwellings on Hamwood Park. Now, I appreciate that may not go far enough where we'd like to be in terms of obviously tackling climate change, but in terms of policy, that was a negotiated position that went beyond sort of the policies that we've got, both at national and at a local level. So it's just to make that point and clarification. Thank you.
Thanks for confirming that. So thank you for everyone's comments on that. So I'm going to look to move to the vote. So we have an officer's recommendation to approve the application, but mindful clearly of all those points.
Chair.
Yes, Councillor.
Sorry, can I just ask one more question of Louise?
Very quickly, please.
Louise, the dwelling emission rate, is that what you mean? Because is that where the 10% is coming in? Because for me, there isn't any detail there to actually say what they're actually going to do to achieve that, other than not use as much water, which people do anyway, because everybody doesn't. All new houses have water meters, so I don't see how you can get those figures if there isn't any clarity as to what they're actually going to put in. They're putting gas central heating in, but there isn't enough room to put mechanical heat pumps in, or even put the ground source heat pumps in. And in some of those houses, not even a utility room. They're 4-bedroom houses, no utility room. So how they can be future-proof and fit for purpose, I don't see it. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Just, do you want me to quickly just come back on that? Just obviously, Sean can comment if he wants to any further on any specific measures, but obviously the report details that Bellway are proposing a fabric first approach to achieve that 10%. And and they believe that they can achieve that 10% unless Sean said otherwise through that approach.
Do you want to make a quick final comment, Sean, primary to the vote?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Louise said. It's a fabric first approach in terms of insulation. Yeah, the 10% relates to energy performance efficiency rather than just solely water. So yeah, it's the structure, it's the frame of the building that provides the efficiency.
Thank you very much indeed. So with that clarified, we have a recommendation to approve. So can I see the proposer and seconder for the recommendation to approve? Councillor Rowley, Councillor Deering, thank you. Callum, over to you, please, for the vote.
Thank you. So if after I've called your name, if you can indicate if you're for or against the officer's recommendation to approve the application or wish to abstain from the vote. Starting with Councillor Adams.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
Against, because there isn't the detail there, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Titcombe.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Fairland.
For.
Thank you. That's 7 votes for, Chair, and 1 against.
Very much, Callum. So that application is therefore approved. So we have hit 8 o'clock. Is everyone happy to complete the remaining 2 items? Obviously, mindful of David's wise words about time and trying to reach our decisions.
Yeah, happy, Chair.
In that time frame. Okay, thank you. So we turn to item 5.3, KT 2020-0291, 44 Clarence Road in Kettering. No update on this application. So we'll just wait for the presentation on screen and I'll give another once that's ready.
Yeah, one of those days.
Yeah, no problem, David. A bit of banging in the background. So can someone turn off their, can everyone just remain muted, please? Unless he's speaking.
Here we go.
Thank you, David. So that is good to go, that presentation.
Thank you very much. It's me this time. So this is a traditional terraced house in Kettering. And the current position is it's got sort of upstairs, downstairs as one single household. The proposal is to create 2 flats, one on the first floor, one on the ground floor, with separate means of access for each flat. At the rear of the site, there's a large garden area, and included within the proposal is the option for each occupier of flat 1 and 2, if that's what they are, to have some garden area for amenity purposes. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these are the drawings, and you'll see at the moment, this is a not unusual arrangement where on the ground floor between the 2 terraced houses, there's a means of access for people to take the bins down in the morning and leave them and take them back at night. Just one correction on the report. On page 44, refers to refuse storage area shall be within a separate room. It makes sense for the refuse area, the bin stores, to be somewhere within the garden area at the rear, and that can be covered by that condition. Next slide, please. So the proposal is to create these 2 flats with some additional small scale building at the back of the site. Next slide, please. That's again showing the, yeah, so we'll go to the photographs. I think they're helpful. So on the right, on the left hand side of the photograph, you can see just about the entry between the 2 houses and the gate. Again, quite a typical arrangement. And then at the rear of the site, there's proposal for some additional building. Next slide, please. So that's the existing outrigger, and the proposal is to extend some building work in there. Next slide, please. This is taken from down the garden. clearly it's quite a large area. You can see from there, although it's a bit untidy at the moment, it can be suitably allocated for the use by the 2 occupiers. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's just showing the entry a bit clearer. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's taken from the first floor, looking down the garden. You see it's quite a large area for each flat to have a level of amenity. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's just another view from the back. So I'll leave the photographs at that. So this proposal is to create 2 single flats, and the issues relate to, is this a level of development which complies with standards? If it was a single house, you could have the same number of occupiers in the property as proposed under this arrangement. They're essentially one bed flats, and the size of the units and the size of the flats are referred to on page 50 of the agenda. So you can see the sizes for the internal floor space, which meets national space standards. I mentioned the bin stores could be located within the garden area somewhere and then taken out on bin day. So that's arrangement could work for both occupiers. It's not uncommon for terraced houses of this sort to have their properties turned into flats upstairs and downstairs. It's quite common in a number of these areas. The report also deals with the residential amenity, and there's no new windows proposed from the buildings themselves that would create further overlooking than already exists between the neighbours. So although there may be different flats, they're not creating an additional amenity issue. Clearly there's no parking available for the terraced house, but to make the point that these properties could be occupied by people with cars, this property could be occupied by people with 2 cars in any event. So the officers have considered this and the impacts and concluded that this proposal would be acceptable in planning terms, subject to the conditions identified in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. So we have no speakers on this item. So therefore we turn to the member debate. Does anyone wish to comment or speak on this application? Councillor Thurland, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just like meterage, the space standard for a one bedroom flat with a bathroom, I believe, is 39 square metres. So while I don't have a problem with the ground floor flat, it's the first floor flat I think is too small, and there's no storage. And while it says on there there's a dedicated secure bike store that could offer additional storage of domestic items, I'm not sure anybody wants to go and impact on residential amenity. And given this is a 2 up, 2 down terraced house, yeah, we understand these things do happen and they change, but they do cause a lot of problems. And I've had the experience I've had with other residents in this street is noise from next door. Now, I've had residents who have had to have one of our noise monitoring machines because of the noise coming from next door. And bearing in mind, upstairs on that first floor flat, you're going to have kitchen stuff, you're going to have a washing machine, tumble dryer and things like that right next to somebody's bedroom wall. And when they're on night shift, they're trying to sleep during the day, I think that's going to be a problem. Or if you've got children who go to bed early and people are in the kitchen. So on page 3, policy 8, it says seeks to ensure quality of life and about the impact on residential amenity and an unacceptable impact by way of noise and vibration. And that is the one, not overdevelopment. That is my concern, the impact on the residential amenity of those people who are actually living next door, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Tickman, please.
Can I just come back on that?
Yeah, of course, Peter.
Yes, the issue about behaviour, if you will, is not really a planning issue. People are good neighbours. That's not a planning issue. Clearly, there are other routes to follow for that. So if someone is playing the stereo too loud or whatever, they can contact the environmental health.
Yeah.
On the issue about the amenity between the two flats or even against the neighbouring properties, the proposal would have to satisfy building regulations, and there are regulations that deal with things about noise movements between the two flats. So those things could be dealt with under the building regulations. But what we're looking at in here is a proposal to turn a terraced house into two flats, probably the same number of people to be living there.
And Peter, I agree with the same number of people, but the sizes of where people are living, correct me if I'm wrong, if with a one-bedroom flat with a bathroom, not a shower room, has to be 39 square metres. And policy 8 is ensure quality of life by protecting amenity, and it actually says noise, vibration. So that's the bit I'm going on. Thank you, though.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tickman, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is part of my ward, as you know. I share with Councillor Thurland. This is a whole area of terraced houses in. Parking is a real premium. I'm surprised there isn't more arguments of what there is, but just a little bit along the street, we've already okayed some conversion on houses, if anybody's thinking of objecting to this. And the amount of houses that we have agreed to in Kettering have been smaller than this and larger conversions, so just bear that in mind. I can't find any term to refuse this. I don't like to see it done because all it does is bring 2 more cars to find somewhere to park. But that is the problem with the people that bring it. We have a bus service somewhat that runs down the main road just along the street a bit, Starwood Road. Not too regular. I will vote for this. I don't like to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor O'Hara, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think relevant to this property concerns me. Yes, it's got some good outdoor space, but the internal space I don't think is fit for purpose, and I don't think it, like Councillor Thurns has already said, it doesn't comply with the space requirements. I didn't think. First of all, flat's only 36, not 39. But it's more a case of is the impact on the people living next door, and I think that is a consideration, like we said on policy 8. I think internally you can't see specifically how it is going to be developed, but looking at it, I don't feel that it would be really conducive to living for the people that would have into there and people immediately adjacent. Whether we can refuse it on the grounds of space is a material consideration, I think.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Deering, please.
I'm back on the space thing.
You can, yeah.
Because the report's really clear. Although there's on flat, first floor flat, there's depending on how you measure it, there's a minor variation. It is very minor, and to sort of refuse it on those grounds would be very difficult to sustain it as an argument, given that there are lots of these type of properties that are converted, as we heard, to this type of use. And in terms of impact on the neighbours, the setting aside human behaviour, the actual use of the building, which is what the fundamental proposal is is no different from what it is at the moment. So in planning terms, it's not likely to generate a different impact than the one that may exist from people living there, or depending on whether they're good neighbours or bad neighbours.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. Councillor Darren, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on page 49, I obviously have some concerns on what I'm hearing when I'm reading here about noise and that. Now, I do wonder if there's anything that can be done. When you convert a place, you obviously have to look at the acoustic installation. Is there a way that we can, because here what we're saying is, that the developer would have regard for building regulations. Well, I think that we need to ensure that there are decent acoustics put in. So is there a way that that can be put into a condition at all?
That's a very good point there, Councillor Peter.
Well, I have seen conditions about noise attenuation between the first floor and the ground floor. But my understanding is, in relation to building regulations, not just have regard to it, this is what the building regulations would require it. So what I can suggest to you, that we can double check that is the case, because that's my understanding. And if it's more than just having a nod to the building regulations, then we could consider a condition, but I don't think it's going to be necessary.
I think if the opportunity arises to enhance the noise protection.
Thank you, Chair. I do actually, Peter. I'm sorry, but I think that we should have some form of condition on this, because I have no objection to turning it into two separate flats. What I object to, and we have to consider, and unfortunately, we have too many people with regard to weak terminology, I'm afraid. Well, we'll have regard for the building regulations. Oh, well, actually, we didn't do it properly, but we got away with it. I think we do need to put some form of condition on this that ensures that they do accept and they do deal properly with the acoustics of this building.
Well, I'm happy to add this in if that's what members want.
I think so.
Well, I'd be happy to have it. I don't know about everybody else, but I'd like to see something conditioned on it.
Chair, can I just add that I'd like to see that added, please?
Yeah, I feel that colleagues are mindful, certainly myself. I think that would be good to enhance that. So thanks to that, Councillor. And Peter, I'm going to move to Councillor Edwards, please.
Thank you. First of all, just because it's been done before doesn't mean it's right that this application goes through on that. And the second thing is, noise can be all sorts of different things. And I think Councillor Thurland, said about washing machines, dishwashers and things. And in a single dwelling house, you're unlikely to have a dishwasher or a washing machine upstairs, where it could interfere with the next door's neighbours rattling against walls, etc., etc. But having two flats, then yes, that is going to happen, because actually you're going to have a washing machine upstairs and downstairs, or a dishwasher or a tumble dryer, or any of those different appliances. So yeah, I'm struggling with this application, if I'm honest.
Thank you for that, Councillor. And Councillor Adams, to make your final point, and then I'll look to move this forward.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, my points really have been covered, but the concerns I've got for the noise is not about people and noisy neighbours, but I actually live in a terraced house, and I know how easily the noise travels between the bedroom spaces. So my concern is as Councillor Thurland's was, I cannot imagine a washing machine or a tumble dryer, really, they're the two main things, rumbling against the bedroom walls. It's not what the houses were built for. I would imagine they haven't got the soundproofing between ground floor and first floor, and definitely not the soundproofing between sideways to each neighbour. So that would be that really is a major concern to me. I mean, in some of these terraced houses, you can walk across the attics. It's just a single skin wall. You can take a brick out and see into your neighbour's attic. So I really do have concerns about washing machines and tumble dryers up in that top flat.
Thank you for that, Councillor. So it sounds like with perhaps a meaningful condition, a meaningful improvement on the noise.
Yeah, we can cover that.
May overcome Members' concerns?
Not just in terms of between the floors, but on the walls, etc. So we make sure it's dealt with as adequately as possible.
Thank you.
Chair, can I come back?
One final point.
The point of just because we've done it before doesn't mean to say that we should continue doing it. We are meant to be looking for good places for people to live. We don't just want 1-bedroom flats all over the place. And if you have 2 people living in that house, it's a 2 up, 2 down. You could have 2 bedrooms upstairs. People live downstairs, exactly the same people, but you're not going to have going against policy 8. And I would like to suggest that we refuse that on policy 8 with the unacceptable impact due to noise and vibration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So Councillor Dunham has proposed an amendment to refuse with that reason. Councillor
Chair.
second. Oh.
Doesn't matter. I mean, Chair, I was going to say I'm quite happy to accept that. It's all very well putting, a restriction on, but I'm not sure how you can put a restriction on an upstairs flat in not using a washing machine or tumble dryer or being, careful about when you use it. I'm not sure a condition on that application would work for that purpose. So therefore, I'm quite happy to support Councillor Thurland in refusing the application.
Thank you. So we have a proposed and seconded amendment to refuse, not approved for those reasons. Peter, did you wish to comment before I go to the vote?
Well, just to repeat that, we can put conditions on relation to noise, vibration, but people moving into a flat like that will have to make a choice. And, lots of flats have limited options to put washing machines upstairs and so forth. And people live accordingly. So they might go to the laundrette instead, for example. So there's no automatic assumption that the flats upstairs will have a washing machine.
I think, Peter, we're trying to work out the effect it would have on the amenity of the next door neighbour, not the people who actually move in there. It's because they know what they're going into, as you say, but it's when they do move in there, it's the unacceptable amenity effect on the next door neighbours on both sides if it comes to it.
It's not quantified. That concern hasn't been quantified, and yes, we could put conditions on relating to noise attenuation between the flats and between on the party wall. But, the concerns raised about it's going to be noisy, if it's refused, would have to be demonstrated to the inspector if the thing goes to appeal. And that's the issue for members to consider.
Okay, thanks for that. So with that amendment on the table, I see your hand up for a very, very quick point there, Councillor, before I go to the vote.
Chair, could we also then include policy 30B of the JCS?
What is that, Councillor? Can you add a bit more?
Space standards, I know we've tried to quantify it, but if you're thinking of the space in reality for what is actually going to have to go into that flat, whether they have a washing machine or not, the space standards aren't great on the first floor. And with all due respect, it's a terraced house, it's probably steep steps. So getting a washing machine up there may not be, but it's not just a washing machine, it could be a hi-fi or anything, or just general living. And I think it's that we're trying to protect against. We're going to live in a COVID world for years to come, and you wouldn't want to live in a flat that small.
Okay, thanks for that. So an additional point there.
Just sort of say that the space standard thing, I've already addressed that in the report. And the minor variation is something that officers consider to be very difficult to defend on for a reason like that.
Okay, so with those in mind, we have a amendment to refuse, not approve. So I'm going to ask Callum to conduct votes on the amendment to refuse, not approve the application.
Thank you, Chair. So if after I've called your name, if you could indicate if you're for or against the motion to refuse the application, or if you wish to abstain from the vote. Again, starting with Councillor Adams.
Sorry. Sorry, could you just repeat that?
Yeah, so we're voting, Councillor, on the amendment to refuse the application, not approve, for all those reasons we just discussed.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Deering.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
For refusal, please.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Titcombe. Thank you. And Councillor Fairland.
For.
Thank you. At the end of that, Chair, that was 6 votes for the motion to refuse and 2 against.
Thank you, Callum. So that application is therefore refused for those reasons we've just discussed there, which brings us to our very final item of the evening, 55 KT 2020-0442 17 Deal Road in Kettering. No update on that one. David is just going to do the usual with the screen.
Oh, do behave. That should be there, Chair.
Thank you very much, David. So that is good to go.
Thank you. So the application site is 17 Deeble Road in Kettering. If we can go to the next slide, please. It's a proposal for a first floor side extension, which sits above the existing ground floor. In terms of key issues, the main one in this case is the impact on the neighbours number 15, which is adjacent to the position of that first floor extension. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this is the existing floor plans and elevations of the site. And if you look at the left-hand side at the top, the existing front elevation, you'll note the single story on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. And above that is where the extension will sit. In terms of its design, it is set down from the existing roof and it's set back approximately 450 mils from the front. So it does read as an extension. The proposed left side elevation is the elevation that will face the neighbour at number 15 Deeble Road. And as you will note, there are no first floor windows proposed in that elevation. There is a condition to prevent any further opening should this receive approval tonight. If we could go to the next slide, please. So these are the application site is on the right hand side. And you'll note that single story element which will be built upon. Just to advise, obviously I mentioned it will be set back 450 mils from the front. In terms of at the back, it will only extend in line with the existing 2-story part of the building. It won't project any further back into the rear garden. On the left-hand side of that photo is number 15, and you'll note there are a number of windows in that side elevation, and I'll come back to those in a moment. If we could go to the next slide, please. Again, this is another view, and number 15 is a bit more in view in this particular shot on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. So here, this is the side elevation of number 15, who has submitted objections to us, which are set out in the report to you. There's a lot of dots on this plan, so I'll let you know what the dots mean, so that obviously it's fundamental to the considerations in this case. So the red dots at first floor level are windows to a toilet and bathroom. The green dots are to a hallway and landing, all of which are non-habitable rooms. The points to note are the yellow dots. Now, the window that you can see in the centre of the photo is to a kitchen. That is a secondary window. And then you've got a conservatory, fully glazed conservatory on the back, which is the other yellow dot that you'll see on that particular photo. We can go to the next slide, please. And this is a photo taken from the rear of that neighbouring property, and you'll see the conservatory in the back, which then leads through into the kitchen area, where that window on the side is situated. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see the application site. And the first floor will sit, as I say, in line with the existing 2-storey part of that dwelling and won't project any further back. Next slide, please. So the next 2 photos are taken within the property at number 15, so the property that has raised an objection to the application. This is that side kitchen window, which is considered to be a secondary window to this particular area. Next slide, please. And this is the rear elevation where you've got obviously a window and then doors leading out into that conservatory area, which is fully glazed. So there are additional openings and light coming in from that rear elevation. And with obviously taking that into account, officers consider that first floor extension is acceptable, and that relationship between the two is an acceptable one. Obviously subject to the conditions set out in your report, but it is recommended for approval tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Louise. No speakers on this item. So therefore, we do move to the debate, but I see no hands raised for people wishing to comment. Okay, nobody wants to speak on this item. Then we have an officer's recommendation before us to approve the application. So can I therefore seek a proposer and seconder for that? Councillor Rowley and Councillor Mitchell. Thank you. And Callum, please conduct a vote on the recommendation to approve the application.
Thank you, Chair. So if I've called your name, if you can indicate if you're for or against the officer's recommendation to approve the application, or if you wish to abstain from the vote, starting with Councillor Adams.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
For, please.
Councillor O'Hara.
She's for. Helen. Did you just want to restate that, Councillor?
Sorry, did you give me 4?
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Titcombe.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Fairland.
Against, I think.
Sorry, I'm against.
Against, sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. After that, it was 7 votes for and 1 vote against.
Thank you very much, Callum. So that application is therefore approved. So that concludes our business for this evening. Thank you very much indeed for everyone for your patience, your contributions tonight, councillors, officers and members of the public watching us on YouTube.